Hey guys, before I start, I want to mention a project that I'm currently working on with one of my colleagues. It's called Rift, and it's a platform that allows you to interact directly with your favorite content creators through gaming and streaming. This weekend, Saturday, November 3rd at 6 p.m. EST, I will choose 3 of my viewers to play Fortnite with me and stream the event on my Twitch. Raffle tickets are $2.50, and all the money goes to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta to fund pediatric endeavors. If 100 people sign up, I'll do something special on stream. So make an account on Rift and join today. Link is in the description. I'll see you guys then. Another day, another Athlon 200 GE video, but this time with a little bit more personality. Don't worry, I've seen all of your comments asking for in-depth Athlon 200 GE benchmarks. That video will be out in about 2 weeks if time permits, but I want to have a little bit of fun in the meantime while I am benchmarking and setting up that video. Like my previous video where I pushed the Ryzen 5 2600X and the Deepcool Captain 240 to their limit, I want to push the Athlon 200 GE to its limit, like to its very limit. And what's more limiting than that? Than 8K. 8K resolutions vary, but it's generally 7680 by 4320. It has 4 times the amount of pixels of the standard 4K resolution, or 3820 by 2160. While 8K devices and multimedia is uncommon, it's actually not new. The first 8K display was Sharp's 85-inch LCD TV, unveiled at CES in 2012. Since then, only 19 8K displays, that includes TVs and monitors, have been released. Nowadays, an 8K device generally runs you around $3,500 at the very minimum. 8K might be the next frontier beyond 4K, but at the current moment, it's not widely supported. And that's because 1, we don't have the bandwidth to support 8K streaming, and 2, we don't have the proper hardware to actually drive those 33 million pixels. Marques Brownlee did a video on the Dell 8K monitor and played a Dirt Rally at 8K max settings using a Titan XP, and it struggled badly. It was like watching a very pretty slideshow. At 4K, the Titan XP averages around 70 frames per second using the same settings, so less than half the performance at 8K. So yeah, 8K isn't viable at the moment. Until today. The mighty Athlon 200 GE is here to save us from the 8K gaming drought, something that the Titan XP just couldn't achieve. And I'm totally kidding about that. The $55 APU has 2 cores and 4 threads, and an integrated Vega 3 graphics chip that performs a bit slower than the DDR4 GT1030. It's not a show voter, but I'd like to see exactly how it can hold up in older games and modern esport titles like League of Legends at freakishly high resolutions. Now, do you guys remember when I mentioned how freakishly expensive current 8K devices are? Yeah, well, I'm a college student, which is essentially synonymous with I'm broke. So I don't have $3,500 to splurge on a new monitor for a single video. Thankfully, super resolution programs exist from AMD, NVIDIA, and third-party developers that allow you to emulate higher resolutions and downsample them to your native resolution. And that's exactly how I was able to run 8K games on my 1440p monitor. AMD does have virtual super resolution, and since we have an integrated AMD chip, that's exactly what we would be using, but that only goes up to 4K. There are several solutions for this on NVIDIA cards, but very little on AMD technology, especially with the Adrenaline update. After browsing for hours, I finally came across this comment by CS Killers on RGNHD's video on 8K gaming. They suggested a program called, and sorry if I butcher this, Gedo Sato, a downsampling program that works specifically on DirectX 9 titles on any GPU, AMD, NVIDIA, or Intel, and they were right. It worked perfectly. So thanks to the developers and thanks to CS Killers for your comment, it really saved my butt. Pixio was also kind enough to supply a 32-inch curved 1440p 144Hz panel, the PXC32. It's a beautiful monitor with very thin bezels and decent color accuracy, and a great candidate to try out 8K gaming on because of its size, curves, brightness, and high refresh rate. And lastly, before we get into the benchmarks, a quick disclaimer. While I do want to push this Athlon 200 GE to its limit, I need to be realistic. This is a 720p to maybe 1080p gaming chip, and 8K is 36 times greater than 720p. So this means games like PUBG, GTA 5, and Far Cry just won't be able to run at such a high resolution. And even games that are easier to run like Fortnite just would be too tough at 8K on the Athlon 200 GE. The games I tested today are a combination of older popular games and modern low-spec esport titles. And the list is GTA San Andreas, Half-Life 2, and Far Cry, the original. And then for our modern games, we have League of Legends and CSGO. I started with Half-Life 2 at 8K using the lowest graphical settings. Once I noticed that the FPS was dipping into the 15s, I knew this was going to be an interesting set of benchmarks. Even a 14-year-old game can bring some modern computers to their knees at such a high resolution. Because of this, I decided to test the games at both 4K and 8K to get a more comprehensive idea of the amount of power needed for 7680 by 4320. I still enjoyed the game, and 60 FPS was great at 4K. I averaged about 78, but it was way out of reach at 8K. In Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, 8K wasn't that bad despite the low numbers. These games were almost designed for lower FPS, around 25, because of the hardware that they were built on, and also because of their in-game frame limiter. So even though it was averaging around 14, I didn't feel a huge difference from what I was used to on my PS2. But then again, I also played this game over 10 years ago, so the feelings probably changed a bit. Nonetheless, 4K was amazing. 60 FPS at such a high resolution looks great, and it's much more fun. In the original Far Cry, using the lowest settings, I was averaging around 30 frames per second at 8K at the very beginning and was pleasantly surprised. But that didn't last very long once I stepped outside. The foliage and the environment were a lot to render at such a high resolution, and the frames per second took a huge hit. 4K was still very playable, though it did dip here and there, especially with combat scenes. Still, it had the same hit when the foliage was rendered on screen. I averaged around 60 to 80 once I was inside, but once I stepped outside, it dropped to 30 FPS. The first modern game that I tested was CSGO. At 8K, it was easily the worst of all of the games that I tested. 8K gaming was a glorified slideshow and unplayable. 4K gameplay was okay on the other hand, and I held my own well. On top of that, the game looks noticeably better, even at just 4K and at the lowest settings. 8K was great too, but the performance ruined the experience for me. And the very last game that I tested was League of Legends. And honestly, at 8K, I expected it to do better than the numbers, considering it can run on pretty much any computer nowadays. I suppose the amount of pixels 8K needs can even make League a tough game to run. I experienced the most dips here at 4K, and 8K was laggy, but at the cusp of playable if your standards are low enough. I will say that I experienced awful mouse glitches at 4K and 8K. 4K was manageable, but the mouse issues at 8K rendered the game unplayable. Overall, gaming on a $250 gaming computer with the Athlon 200 GE is semi-plausible at 4K, and it really depends on the games that you play too, and a big fat no at 8K. Now, despite all of this, there was a lot of things that I learned. For one, downsampling is awesome. Even at the lowest settings, at 8K, the game looked phenomenal, and it really breathed new life in a lot of the older titles that have lower resolution textures. The edges were sharper, and everything looked much cleaner, and that's without any mods. Here's a side-by-side difference between an 8K image, 4K image, a 1440p image, and a 1080p image. From afar, and honestly, YouTube's compression algorithm has something to do with it, the difference isn't that large. But if you zoom in closer on the same spot in each of the 4 pictures, you'll see astronomical changes. And they're even more noticeable on bigger displays like my Pixio PX-C32. Secondly, 8K gaming is currently out of reach, but I'm sure you already knew that. You might be able to get away at gaming at 8K with older games, or even with newer games at the lowest settings using the strongest video cards out there at the moment, but it's mostly unplausible. But at 4K, you can still get solid performance with enthusiast settings, and that's usually where most people go to if they're looking for something a bit better. Thirdly, the Athlon 200GE is shaping up to be a great choice for retro gamers, people who just like to play older games, and even possibly emulation, which a video for that is in the works, by the way. If you're playing games circa 2010 or older, then the 200GE gives you great performance for a solid price. And lastly, my Pixio PX-C32 looks fantastic. There are a few drawbacks of the monitor, and that mostly comes from the stand itself and using the generic PNP drivers Microsoft has used since 2006. Yeah, that needs to change. But in terms of an experience in gaming, it is phenomenal. It looks and feels great, and if you guys are interested in a full review, then let me know, and I will see what I can whip up. So, with all of that being said, what do you guys think of 8K gaming? Is it a viable choice for breathing new life into older games? And will you try it yourself in the future? Also, let me know if you want to see more 8K gaming or high resolution gaming content on the channel in the future. Right now, I'm considering doing a video where I pick up a lower mid-range or a budget video card like a 1050 or a 1050 Ti and try it in the same games as in this video. It's noticeably faster than the 200GE's integrated GPU, and it's affordable for most of my viewers. So we'll do this. If that's something you're interested in, put a smiley or winky face in the comment below and tell me which video card you want me to try out. But that is it for this video, guys. If you guys liked it, then leave a like. And if you loved it, share, subscribe, all of that stuff, because I have more videos like this coming out in the near future. Also, don't forget to sign up for Rift. All of that stuff is in the description below. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments and I'll try to respond to them as quickly as possible. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.